A long drawn-out groan, the odd, low-to-high whine that hinges love to make, pierced the darkness. My consciousness stirred as it hung somewhere in that void between dream and reality. Slowly, sluggishly, I swam towards the realization until it shot forward, crashing right into my mind's eye. My eyes snapped open, climbing the unfamiliar walls until the panic subsided. Blaze was still tucked up against me, her soft exhalations tickling my mane. Squinting, I tried to recall the moments before sleep, but all that I had was a muddled mix of fatigue and tears. I looked up towards the door, even though I knew no pony other than Ivory could have entered. There was that long, distant longing in her eye, the one that could cleave through time. I wondered which, if not all, of her family she was seeing. Regardless, I didn't feel comfortable asking. Her eyes met mine, and she hastily cleared her throat. Sleep well? As much as can be expected, I guess. I nudged at Blaze's head, gently guiding it to the pillow. How was yours? Restful. Ivory scoffed a hoof, but healing spells are good at that. Last night's curiosity returned, and I found myself staring at the gap in her cloak. Though my body felt like one big bruise, my thirst for knowledge pushed me to my hooves. And your injury? She lifted the side of her cloak. The only trace of her wound was a soft pink scar carving a long, thin, bald spot across her coat. That's amazing, I said, fighting the urge to poke it with a hoof. My gaze drifted toward her flank, and I realized that was the first time I'd gotten a clear look at her cutie mark. The black silhouette of a pony climbing a simple mound of dirt was strangely endearing. It was a cutie mark that knew, despite all stigma, that it wanted to do good. Questions had been lingering at the back of my mind, drifting to the forefront. I looked back at Ivory. So how did it happen, anyway? You know. I know what your zombies are capable of. Your defenses should have been impenetrable. It's not important. She tried to look away, though her eyes kept flicking back towards me. On one of her return bouts, I met her gaze and held it. Ivory. You were taking too long. I started to worry, so I sent a bird to check. I didn't want to lose you. Ivory looked away again. And that's how the bandit got through. Ivory nodded. So, our close save was... A horrible wave of guilt slammed into my gut, but I fought through it as best I could. I staggered forward and pressed my cheek against hers, careful not to stay in her personal space too long. What? She stared. Thanks. You really saved us back there, and, well, I'm honored that you care so much about me. I just feel terrible that you had to get hurt for it. It was nothing. She looked at the floor for just a moment before her eyes snapped over to the cots, and she pulled her cloak down. I followed to her gaze. Blaze was still on her cot, but her eyes were wide, mixed on the spot where Ivory's cutie mark was concealed. Only a bare whisper, modulated between oh and uncertainty, escaping her lips. Necromancer. I am. So what? Ivory gave Blaze a hard stare, the same kind of look she'd given me when we'd first met. Blaze's jaw moved up and down, but the words drifted out like gaseous thoughts escaping on their own. This isn't what I expected. Ivory rolled her eyes. I've never heard that one before. She's not a bad pony, you know, I said, trying to cut the tension before it could build any further. I had a feeling I'd need a sharper blade. I know, Blaze looked at the tear in Ivory's cloak. It's hard. I was always taught that you were the face of everything wrong with our town. Ivory slumped a little. I shot Blaze a questioning glance. Really? Every problem? With a nod, she turned her attention to the cot, scuffing little swirls into the sheets. Droughts, parasprites eating the crops, wild storms, you name it. He always said they were all hexes, or curses, brought down upon us by the Necromancer. He? I was pretty certain I knew the answer, but I wanted to hear it from Blaze. The mayor. Prideful policy. Ivory stiffened. Thought so. I tapped my hoof against my chin. Blaze looked up for just a moment. What? You know him? No. I know about him. And from what I've heard... My eyes drifted over to Ivory. Those antics sound just about right. There's just one thing that bothers me. What? Blaze continued to watch her hoof. As far as I know, the legend can't possibly be much older than him. How did he get the elder folk on board? Blaze gave me a confused look. It was my turn to ask. What? The legend itself ties itself into an older one, about a sorcerer. Ivory stared at the wall. I racked my brain, but I could not recall a legend within a legend, and I was certain I hadn't missed anything on the page. Then, the version I read, it must not be complete. Would you tell me the full story? Blaze spoke quickly, but steadily, the words leaving her lips with an unthinking familiarity. There was once a sorcerer whose desire for immortality overrode all else. He worked tirelessly, committing endless atrocities along the way. Finally, he turned to necromancy, seeking to join the ranks of the legendary liches. Though he was no longer mortal, the spell was imperfect. His body could not hold against the strain of such powerful magic. Little by little, he deteriorated, until he was a complete crippled husk. In desperation, he transferred his power and mind to a corpse. Even though his new body was destined to suffer the same fate, at long last, he had found his immortality. All he needed was more bodies. Thus, the sorcerer became the Necromancer, a fearsome defiler of the dead. The Necromancer knows no boundaries. Those foolish enough to wander the roads at night have vanished, only to turn up later as part of the Necromancer's relentless army. I frowned, wondering just how this longer version had eluded me, especially when most of my research had been done in Canterlot, home of the largest library in Equestria. My frown deepened. Then, when I was nearly chewing on my scarf, Ernest Cure's words came surging back to me. I realized that if the mayor had lost credibility with the guard, that could easily cascade to other organizations. And if no pony cared, none of the records were guaranteed to be reliable. Turning to Blaze, I asked, and everyone believed it. Just about. She spoke the words slowly, squirming with each syllable. So, he can say the sorcerer has taken over anyone he wants to discredit it? Ivory's eyes were distant again, nodding as she spoke. I still remember what he said, the day he quashed all doubt of my guilt. You may wear the face of that filly, but you will never be anything more than a monster necromancer. A heavy silence fell over the room. We weren't exactly in the best of positions, but I did have one last ace to play. What if I had something that might tie him to the bandits who've been playing the legend for their own gain. A tiny spark of hope lit Ivory's faces. It would explain much. What is it? I trotted over to my flight satchel and retrieved the bandit's scroll. Secret correspondence. There's not a whole lot on it, but it's pretty incriminating, and clearly hoof or mouth written. If we could match it to the mayor's, we could bring this whole thing crashing down around him. Ivory slid up beside me and peered over my shoulder as I unfurled the letter. She squinted, eyes flying over the words again and again. Blaze wasn't far behind. Can I see it? The table was getting a little crowded, so I stepped aside, allowing her to squeeze in between me and Ivory. Not 10 seconds passed before Blaze blurted out, "It's his!" I raised an eyebrow. What? How can you be so sure? A sheepish look spread across her face. There's an old wanted poster in the town hall, written by the mayor himself. I've read it every day for years. If only I had known that such an ugly truth was behind it. Hey, I gave her a short, reassuring nudge. At least it's helpful, and it's helping you do good now. We just need to find an official analyst to back up our claims. Although, I have a feeling it might be tough to find one around out here. My dad could help. Blaze practically yelled as soon as I'd finished talking. I tilted my head. How? He has lots of friends in Iron Shoe. Some pony has to be one. Or at least no one. Though the logic wasn't very sound, I could at least appreciate her enthusiasm. And to be fair, connections aren't exactly a trivial asset. Well, not necessarily, but it's a start anyway. So let's hope for the best. We should leave immediately. Wait, Ivory interjected. The stallion. Was he telling the truth? A half-second of confusion quickly cascaded into realization. We still had a prisoner. Aside from a few omitted details, everything was accurate. You go on ahead. I'll see him to safety. I returned to the door. Are you sure? We can come along. No. It's too important to put off. Besides, I shouldn't be seen in pasture. Who are you talking about? Blaze asked. Oh, I bit my lip. We interrogated a bandit in order to get to your location. And you're just gonna let the bandit go? He's a criminal, isn't he? The guard's mare within itself had resurfaced, bringing an old zealous fire back to her voice. I promised to let him go if he told the truth. He kept his word, and so will I. Besides, he's young, practically a colt. If you were in his shoes, wouldn't you want another chance? I looked her straight in the eye. Blaze frowned. I would. But this is different. Is it? I tilted my head. He's not some manifestation of evil. He's a pony. A cooperative pony. At that. And he just wants to live his life. Yeah, but can't we do something else? How do we know he won't rejoin the bandits? We don't. Ivory cut in. But we don't know if we could trust you either. I cocked my head. So, what do you propose? Jail? The closest is pasture, and if the mayor's in cahoots with the bandits, he'll know something's up. I tapped my hoof. Leaving him here while we run off to another city could also be a bad idea. And I don't know about you, but lugging a prisoner all the way to Iron Shoe wouldn't be particularly pleasant, nor within our time frame. What about... Blaze trailed off, her jaw working, but words failing to come out. Killing? I raised an eyebrow. Blaze froze, the seconds dragging out before she finally shook her head. No, I Never mind.